I will say that like a good majority of the stuff that I process is not necessarily investments. I do find those ones particularly fun, again, because there's not a ton of emotion involved, and B, they're a little bit different. And that's kind of fun and exciting. But what makes them fall apart? I think it just comes down to the emotion, whether or not they're truly motivated to buy, or like the buyer panics. Because there's just solutions to every problem. And so I think that's my final answer, is at the end of the day, it's really just, you didn't really want to do it.
You're checking out the Investor Shed podcast with Nick Beveridge and Jeremy Kitchen. They're on the path to financial freedom, and they're taking their community with them. Stay tuned for the best free real estate investing advice on the internet.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Investor Shed podcast. We're so glad you made it. Thank you for sticking around. I hope you stick around for more than 3 minutes. JK, how you doing?
And B, in the house. I'm doing well, my friend. How are you?
Doing pretty fantastic. We just came back from a concert in Seattle. Went and saw Queens of the Stone Age.
We did. It was very good. Yeah.
What'd you think?
I thought it was a great show, man.
Yeah.
Speaking of a great show, we have a great show for you as well today. We got Sam Kitchen on the podcast, my lovely wife. We're going to be talking a lot about transaction coordination, just kind of getting into her story a little bit, and just talking business in general. So it's good stuff.
This podcast is going to be great for those who don't really know what it is like to be in the escrow process. So if you're an experienced investor out there, this probably won't do you very much good unless you need help with your transactions and you're in the North Idaho area or Spokane. If you're a real estate agent out there, this could really help you because we talk about leverage and leveraging these duties to somebody else who can do it better. But really, this is kind of geared towards just walking through a transaction and what it's like, since so many of them actually fall through. What is it like to bulletproof your transaction? What do you got to do?
Right.
So that's what we're going to be speaking about. Hope you enjoy it. Drink up a bunch of water. Stay hydrated. Here we go.
Love it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Investor Shed podcast. I am here with the woman who I make a life a living hell and a living heaven at the same time. And I think she has to deal with Nick and I's bullcrap more than anybody I know. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam Kitchen.
What an intro.
It's my wife, ladies and gentlemen. Today on the podcast, we are interviewing Sam, my wife. She's got a really cool story. She's the reason why I wanted to become where I'm at, and it's going to be a good conversation. So, Sam, why don't you kind of tell everyone about yourself?
They made me be here.
It's true, we did.
This is last minute, so I think today we're talking about transactions, and I own and operate a real estate transaction management company. I started it this year after working with Nick and Joe's team for the previous 5 years. So I owe a lot of what I do already know to Nick and Joe. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sam, for being here. Sam has been involved in a lot of transactions. So this podcast is going to be very educational for those that maybe don't have much experience with the actual process of a real estate transaction, from the moment that a property goes under contract to when it closes and you get the keys. So we're going to be talking a lot about that today. First off, I wanted to thank you again, Sam, for being here on the podcast and in my life. You know, I want to go back real quick and talk to everyone about how Sam came to be where she is. And it had to do with my ex-wife. Now, I had this girlfriend about 15 years ago? And I was dating this girl, and I didn't really like her a lot, but we had fun together. And then I found out that she had an aunt that shared an aunt with my best friend, Jeremy Kitchen. So I figured if I can marry this bitch, then Jeremy can be my cousin-in-law.
That was our plan all along, right? We just wanted to be related. We didn't know how to tie that knot, literally. So continue.
So I marry her, doesn't work out, but now I still have Jeremy as my ex-cousin-in-law, which we will hold forever.
Right. No one can take that away from us. Even if we never are friends again, we're still ex-cousin-in-laws.
Then what is it, 2018 or so? Sam comes to work with Joe and I on our real estate team, and she is amazing. And I'm like, how do I get this woman in my family? And then I think I got to get Jeremy working with us, and then I'll get them together. So glad you guys are married now. Thanks for being here. Let's talk about real estate transactions.
Wait, can I just ask what label that makes me if I'm married to your ex-cousin-in-law?
You're my ex-cousin-in-law's
Spouse.
spouse.
Okay.
That's again, I think that's how we all need to start introducing each other. I want to start going around town and being like, this is my ex-cousin-in-law, Nick, and this is my spouse of my ex-cousin. I don't want to get it overcomplicated.
But when I want you in my family, it's going to happen, and that's all I got to say.
Right. I think I normally just tell people Nick's essentially my brother-in-law with how close you and Jeremy are.
Okay, sorry. Long intro. Thanks for the 6 people that are still listening. So, Sam, you moved here to be on the North Idaho REI team as our administrative assistant, right? And our team manager. You're gonna help us grow this real estate team, this vision that Joe and I had to start recruiting agents and build a team of investor savvy agents. And you were there pretty much from the beginning. Can you tell us about that, what that move was like coming to North Idaho and starting something fresh?
Yes. So I think when I came to join you guys, this was my first time back in the real estate industry. So I was 24, 25 years old. I had experience in title. I had that experience in transaction coordination at John L. Scott on the west side. And then I'd gotten out of real estate because that was the only thing I'd done out of college. I got out of real estate. I did a little bit of business management. I did some door-to-door sales. So I kind of had this like kind of perfect culmination, I think, of experience to come in to do what it is that you guys needed. Like I had the sales experience. I knew that I wasn't good at it. I knew that I didn't enjoy it, but I knew what went into it. And then I had the business management experience. I knew what worked. I knew what didn't work. And then just the general knowledge of a real estate transaction. And so coming into work with you guys, yeah, I feel like I just had kind of this perfect culmination of things and experiences to be able to do what you guys needed. So that was really cool to feel like all of the stuff that I'd gone through those first few years out of college made me a fit for this role at the time. So that was really cool. It was cool to see all the growth and the change in your guys' vision over those 5 years and just be like an implementer. I think I knew I wanted to be an implementer. I didn't have a vision. I wasn't entrepreneurial. So being an implementer was really awesome.
Yeah, and we had a checklist that you can follow and critique over time. So that was I feel like that really helped too. Just having, hey, this is what we would like done. And then what was the saying? Yeah, if as long as you do what's on here, you won't get fired, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
But you took it to another level.
Well, and you guys gave me the room to take it to another level too. Like there was room for error and mistake and correction that I've experienced in previous jobs where there was no room for error, there was no room for correction, and that was super important too. So yes, you had the checklist. The checklist was adaptable. To say that critiquing it is not necessarily correct. Like it's just adaptable to what your needs are, what the market needs were. And so you guys gave me a baseline of systems to be able to adapt to whatever the team needed, whatever each individual agent needed too, because that's varied. You're more of a people person, but you don't necessarily want to be in it all the time versus like some of the other people on the team really want to be in it and know everything and be at the inspections and be at the appraisals. And like, that's totally up to the agent. And I think also because of that experience that allowed me to build up these different systems within my own transaction coordination company of how do we have our baseline, and then how do we build out systems that allow other agents of varying experiences, of varying needs to thrive within the real estate industry.
Yes. And and the biggest takeaway that I want people out there listening to understand, if they don't have much experience with real estate transactions in general, a lot of people can put an offer together and get it accepted. But the industry average of it getting to the finish line, 40% fall through, which is a huge number. When you're working with somebody like Sam, I think your percentage of fall through is way lower. It's like 10% or so, right?
Right. So the deal's not going to fall apart unless the buyer or seller legitimately don't end up wanting to sell or buy. Like that's
Yes. Yeah, something changes. The motivation changes for some reason, or the property isn't what people were expecting it to be, or there's title issues, uncontrollable things typically that cause a transaction to fail. But the inexperience could easily cause a transaction to fail too if you don't have somebody who hasn't done this before. Like with the wrong real estate, there's a lot of real estate agents out there that only do maybe one or two transactions a year and they just forget what's involved and they can screw things up for their buyer or seller.
Well, there's constant changes to the contracts too. There's annual changes that happen that if you're not aware of them, they can really mess things up for your buyers and your sellers, and put them in really tricky, expensive, and messy positions.
Can we walk through and just go through what are the steps of, hey, we got an offer accepted. What do we do now?
Are we talking buyer or seller side or just kind of general?
Say I'm an investor and I just made an offer on a property and I got it accepted.
Okay. And where's like standard conventional loan?
Good questions. Let's say I'm an investor. I'm going to get a hard money loan, but I haven't done anything yet. But I made an offer on an off-market property, so there's no realtors involved, and I have a piece of paper that we wrote down what we're agreeing to price-wise, and that's about it. How can you help somebody along the road, and what kind of processes and what would you teach them where to start and how to get to the middle and then the end?
Yeah. So contractually speaking, if there's no licensed people involved. I am licensed, so there's definitely some stipulations that I'll still have to meet because I am licensed as a TC.
TC is transaction coordinator.
Yes. So if I get a contract that is not a standard Idaho or Washington purchase and sales agreement and is whether it's a wholesaler or an attorney team that have drafted up this contract, I'm reviewing the contract for several timelines and important dates. So one of the important dates is any kind of inspection timeline that they might have. Just important for buyer and seller to know that if there are inspections involved, which a lot of wholesale contracts might exclude that completely. So once we've got the contract, I'm going to be opening up escrow. The escrow company is going to be the middleman for all of the money. They're going to make sure that they're going to work with title and escrow to make sure the property is free and clear to be sold to this next party. Once escrow is opened, I'm communicating directly with the buyer and or seller, whoever has hired me, to communicate those timelines. So the inspection timeline, any other due diligence timelines, maybe like your title review period, any kind of seller disclosure period. In Idaho, you're legally required to have some sort of seller disclosure. I haven't seen a ton of deals that don't have realtors involved, but I'm sure it happens where a sale takes place and there's no seller disclosure. I'm sure that could bite a seller in the butt later down the line. But there's a lot of legalities that go into it if you don't end up using a realtor or some sort of licensed transaction coordinator. That could get really messy.
Yeah, because you could easily think that you're under contract, and then maybe there's no earnest money that's tying up your deal, and that's legal consideration for having a valid contract. A lot of people who haven't been there don't know you have to have some sort of earnest money. It doesn't matter how much it is, and it's best if maybe a third party holds it and not just giving it to the seller. And there should another deadline. You have so much time to get this earnest money to the title company, and there's deadlines upon deadlines upon deadlines upon deadlines. There's probably 14 different deadlines in the contract for different stages that kind of help guide you through the process. But for those that draft their own contracts or have an attorney do it that doesn't do it often, things can become messy. That's where communication goes bad, and that's where people get angry, and a deal falls apart when it doesn't really have to.
Yeah, there's just so many different timelines. I mean, your earnest money could be $1.
Right.
We've seen that. I think you've done that. But yeah, there's just so many timelines involved. So I just highly recommend always using some sort of realtor that has access to your standard contracts. I know there's lots of really great wholesalers contracts out there, but I just think it's worth it to have the licensed party involved that has access to the official contracts with all of your boilerplate language and all of the, I mean, everything's drafted out, everything from your walkthroughs, your earnest money, your inspection, your title contingencies, and they just have these, you just fill in the timelines. And that's so much easier than drafting your own.
Yeah. And then someone's got to keep track of the timelines and constantly remind people about timelines.
And that's where realtors, I mean, as soon as they get a bunch of other things involved and they're out meeting with people, having the transaction coordinator party involved, whether it's me or anybody else, is really helpful. So that's part of my, first day when you're under contract and we're opening escrow, we send out a key dates and deadlines email to the client and the realtor so that everybody is aware these are the top things that are going to be happening within your transaction. You're not blindsided like, oh, I have to send proof of funds by this date. Oh my gosh, my trust that is never going to be able to send a screenshot in time, or what, I don't know what it is, but it happens all the time where people feel blindsided by it. Even with transaction coordinators involved, I find that you are constantly reminding people of the things that comes up because there's so much going on and it's a stressful time. People are so stressed when they're buying and selling most of the time.
Yeah, you get to deal with all the tensions and emotions. And typically, the real estate agent is on the front end and they get to deal with the exciting stuff. We're going to make an offer. Woo! Got the offer, high five. And then they can pass it off to you and be like, good luck with all the emotions. I'm going to go high five someone else.
Yeah, good luck. I don't know what any of this stuff is, but hopefully you can work your magic and make it so you don't disappoint my clients, right?
Yeah. And that's totally an option. Not all transaction coordinator companies will contact the client directly. I'm happy to, being licensed. I don't mind chatting with them, answering questions. I'm not the final decision maker. That's not in my personality type to be the decision maker, but I'm happy to report back any errors and let y'all as realtors make the decisions. But yeah.
As a spouse, you're happy to report any errors to me as well. So thank you for that. Yeah.
I'll make decisions in our marriage.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. But you'll point out the flaws, and that's fine. It's stuff we can all work on, and it's stuff I get better at. And the better I get here, the better we get together. So like you're helping me help you in a broad sense there. Sam, the thing I like, obviously, too, so obviously you do a lot of these transactions for your realtors, but you also do like creative financing contracts and stuff like that. How different do you think the two are when you're, doing either a licensed deal from realtor to client versus like a wholesaler who's unlicensed to just someone buying the wholesale?
I mean, there's less emotions, so that's kind of cool. Usually they're just very cut and dry, scheduling inspection, and, they're inspecting pretty rough properties most of the time. And on a standard home sale, when you get your primary home inspection and it's on a 5, maybe 10-year-old house, and they get that inspection report, and the whole job of an inspector is to point out anything and everything that could go wrong. So you get these inspection reports that are 50 to 100 pages long of just like, wow, your house is falling apart. And your standard home buyer is like, you can't do this. It's just total panic, versus like the wholesalers who know they're getting into a 30 to 50-year-old house and the roof is probably not actually attached to the frame of the house. And they see those inspections and it's not panic. It's okay, well, how much money is it going to take to fix it? And how much time is it going to take? And there's way less emotion involved. So that's kind of cool. I don't know if that answers your original question.
Yeah, it does. And just a side note on that too. So obviously, like I did my first flip with Nick, I think about a year and a half ago. I remember seeing that inspection report, Nick, and I was panicking inside because I've never seen anything. I'm like, there's like 20 pages of stuff that's wrong. I remember bringing that to you and you're like, we don't have to fix all of this.
Which property was this?
This is Violet.
Oh, Violet.
Yeah. I mean, there was a ton wrong in the thing, and I remember panicking like, that's a lot.
Was this when we were selling it or when we bought it?
It might have been when we were selling it. Actually, yes, you are right. When we were selling it, I remember I was like, there's so many things wrong.
But we couldn't get an inspection.
Yeah, you are right. Yeah.
I thought you guys had it inspected after you purchased it, but no, I think you're right. When you were selling it, you had one particular inspector that sent in a report that was over 100 pages.
I know who it was too. We had him on the podcast. Yeah, no, he was great. But Yeah, it's weird because you see these inspection reports, right? And my first thought on my first flip was panic. Like, oh, we're never going to be able to sell it. And Nick was just so calm and collected that entire process. Like, dude, we're going to fix the leak under the sink, and that's all we're doing. So you don't have to fix everything, and that's just a side note I wanted to make. So
Everything's negotiable. Literally almost everything, even post being under contract. Hey, I'm curious, since Sam, actually at this point you have more experience than I do because you're involved in so many transactions. I'm only involved in the transactions I'm involved in, but you're involved in many people's transactions because you help see them through from start to finish. But what are some of the commonalities of the deals that do fall apart? What are some biggest pitfalls newer investors could try to avoid?
Specifically investors. Um,
Or I guess anybody listening to this.
because I will say that like a good majority of the stuff that I process is not necessarily investments. I do find those ones particularly fun again because there's not a ton of emotion involved, and B, they're a little bit different, and that's kind of fun and exciting. But what makes them fall apart? I mean, I think it just comes down to the emotion, whether or not they're truly motivated to buy, or like the buyer panics, because there's just solutions to every problem. And so I think that's my final answer is at the end of the day, it's really just you didn't really want to do it.
Yeah. No, that's well said. Well thought out. I know it took you a minute to rack your brain there, but I think that's a perfect answer. I mean, some people they lose their motivation somehow. And you're perfectly right. Like everything can be fixed. Absolutely any problem out there can be fixed. Everything like construction wise on a house can be fixed if needed. Title issues can be fixed. And then outside of that, you just can't really fix the crazy in some people.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, even if you're a buyer, you have to remember the seller has to be cooperating too. So if the seller doesn't want to do it, they'll find a way to back out too. But I also want to say, like, you don't have to want to do it. Like, if there is a title issue that you don't want to jump through that particular hoop, don't. But it's no skin off anybody's back.
But in most cases, everybody wants the transaction to go through. A buyer wants to buy, a seller wants to sell, a buyer's agent wants the commission, a seller's agent wants their commission. They all want to make it happen. The lender, believe it or not, wants that deal to go through. Um, the only two people that can give a shit is the appraiser and the inspector. And they feel like they've done a real good job if they throw some adversity into the mix, because then they can justify their fee.
Yeah. Sprinkle in some problems.
So, Sam, let's talk about you. This is not the first time you've been on this podcast. The first time, I can't remember the episode, but it was in season 1. You had just cashed in on a house flip, and you're like, "Yeah, I got money. I'm going to be with you guys forever." Um,
I think you're paraphrasing.
and then something changed over time. What made you feel like I want to do my own thing and I want to build my own business? And what was that process like? Because there's a lot going on there. What made you first think that this might be doable or possible?
Well, I've done it so many times with you. Like I've helped you build a dozen businesses.
All super successful.
All of them.
Just kidding.
I mean, and we can unpack success and talk about that. But I think that I'm generally risk averse, not a decision maker. That doesn't necessarily feed me. But I was ready to make more of the decisions. I was ready to be a decision maker. And I think it did just sort of hit me that I had done it dozens of times. And so the risk was low. And in analyzing this particular kind of business, the overhead's pretty low. I don't know. And my brain always goes to worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is I have to go work at Starbucks, right?
You wouldn't even come back to us?
I don't know. I didn't think
That's
that option
beyond
would
the worst
exist.
case scenario.
Well, I guess worst case scenario, like true worst case scenario in analyzing this is you guys hated me forever and I would have to go work at Starbucks because this business wasn't successful, right? Like that is the true worst case scenario. Fortunately, that wasn't the worst case scenario that happened, and you guys were incredibly supportive, and it felt like a win-win for what the market was doing, what your guys' businesses were doing, and what I wanted to do. So in my mind, it felt like a win.
For those that don't know what the experience is like, going from a W-2 paid by the hour, show up at this time, leave at this time, request your vacations off, get permission for everything always. What is it like to go from that to I can do my own thing and make the same or more money? Is it more stress or less stress? Or are there,
It's just different.
it's just different. Okay.
It's just different. It's a different kind of stress. This week in particular was a little bit of a stressful week. I've been asked to do several things on my task list that I don't necessarily have built out, and I had to like put up a fee for it, like find a way to charge for it, and it was very last minute. The people that were requesting it needed it like that day. Um
They sound unreasonable.
Sound like most realtors, to be honest with you.
there's a lot of that I'm finding happens more and more, that people have needs, and I have the capacity to meet it for a price, and being willing to put the price that I'm actually worth on it, and be okay with the fact that some people just aren't going to be okay with it. I think people with my personality type are like really not okay with people not being okay with that. So it just pushes you in a whole different way than like, yes, with a W-2 job, I knew what to expect every day. I was paid very well. And, I worked with some of my best friends, like super cool.
But there was no maternity leave.
I don't know. There was one time, I didn't get it on recording. There was one time you said I could get maternity leave, but
I was drunk probably.
All I know is you promised me paternity leave, so I'll be waiting that check, please, any day.
and I mean, just talking about that too. So I have several friends that are getting true maternity leave, anywhere from 12 weeks to 6 months of paid maternity leave.
Wow, 6 months.
Yeah.
They're working at a hospital. They have their government jobs.
Right. They are. They're government jobs. They're the hospital jobs. And I realize the reality of my particular situation is in January, which fortunately we timed this real well, Jeremy, that January is a slower time in the real estate world. But the reality is I will probably have to be back working within a week of having my baby. I will. And working means being here in my bedroom. Like, fortunately, I feel very fortunate that means I get to be home with my baby. I don't have to, I still have support systems and people who will probably babysit and do things, but my other friends who are having babies, yes, they get this time off. And when they have to go back, they're still trying to figure out what they're going to do. So I think that describes perfectly some of the like pros and cons of going from W-2 to entrepreneur. And then like I said, pushing your value onto people and being okay with the fact that some people aren't going to see that value.
And then just kind of adding in on that a little bit, obviously, like Sam and I both got to work with our best friends, right? And then you guys created this whole system where like you guys are basically nurturing entrepreneurs, right?
We had like an incubator.
Yeah, you were basically like an incubator. And like we mean this like with all due respect. Like I learned so much just working in your vicinity that like we wanted to be like you. Right. And in order to be like it, you have to start implementing and integrating those things. So, like we look around and we're like, okay, like everyone else here is business owners. Do we need to do that? Right. That was just discussions we had. And now we are. And we're all still great buddies. And I love it.
Yeah. And for those listening out there that just don't know me, I'm telling you, I'm sarcastic. Heavily sarcastic, and I am super proud of Sam, and I'm glad you're able to do what you wanted to do and take control of your life. There's actually nothing I actually wanted more. I mean, it sucks to like lose the best employee you've ever had, but it's worth it. It's worth it for you guys to be able to do what you want to do. And no, I couldn't be prouder. And now we just got to find more people to do the same thing with.
Yeah. So kind of going back, obviously, Sam has been like one of my biggest supporters too, obviously. I want to talk to you just a little bit about just what it's like dealing with me kind of swinging wide sometimes, like because sometimes I don't have the most direct plan, right? But I come up with these little giblets of like, we should do this, we should do this, we should do this. How do you manage that with me?
I usually tell you it's a bad idea.
That's true.
No, I think I remember the first wide swing you gave me when you first started working with Nick and Joe. We were still dating, and it wasn't a bad idea. It just was a bad idea for you.
Sure.
That you were like, you saw what Nick and Joe were doing, and Nick and Joe make it look easy. They'd been doing it for several years at that point. Like, we never didn't necessarily hear all the trials and tribulations that they went to prior to that. I think we don't necessarily see all of the like hard parts of it, even being in the office with them every day. And so your wide swing, you were like, what if I got my real estate license?
Mm-hmm.
What if I became a realtor? And I just knew that was a bad idea for you at the time. I don't know if that's, I also think being a realtor is terrible. And so I can't say you have those kinds of ideas all the time. They're a little bit more thought out and educated than that now. But that was the first wide swing. And I also think it was the first time that I like realized, well, you're not just going to be somebody that like pays their debts and lives, like that you had potential to be more.
Sure. And that's a good thing, right? I mean, obviously, like, again, that was part of me just seeing what the team was doing. Like, okay, this is a team of realtors who are investing. How do I get to that level? Do I get to be a realtor so I can invest? And the truth was I didn't need to be. And I don't think it would have been my passion even if I would have done it.
And you could. Yeah, I don't want to discourage anybody out there. Like, you don't need to have your real estate license to invest in real estate. But I also have this other belief that it's like the best mastermind you'll ever join if you want to be an investor, because you're going to have access to all the resources, not just some, but all the resources. You have a legal hotline, you've got the MLS, you've got an office you can work in with other agents, investors, real time, like people face to face. And with most masterminds, everything's online. You got to go access your education where you can find it. You don't have access to the MLS. You don't have these people you can't just kick open a broker's door and ask legal questions. But if you have your real estate license, it's one of the cheapest masterminds out there. It's expensive in relative to just, getting something and not being serious with it. But yeah, I'm an advocate for getting your license if you want to be in this industry full time. If you want to buy a house once a year, it's no point. But if you want to buy 2 or more, get your license, because it'll be worth it.
Even the one that I bought, I mean, obviously being licensed helped me within my job working with you guys, and it helps me now being licensed. But buying the one a year paid for itself, plus the work that I did allowed me to like have access to all of those things. So that was super important. But I think that also isn't in for you at like being with me. I have my license. We have access to those things. You don't need to pay for that in order to have access to a lot of the tools.
And for the agents out there listening, like, should I use a transaction coordinator like Sam? Like, is it going to be worth the time? Yes, absolutely. There's nothing more amazing than not having to worry about being the person that has to fill out the contracts always. And you can be on the go and actually be like wherever you are, be there 100%. Because that's what a lot of people struggle with these days. Like, wherever they are, they're not always there 100% because they're tied to their phone. They're tied to their distractions. Wherever you show up, if you can be as present as you can, you're going to do a better job. And I feel like if you can offload the stuff that's repetitive task to somebody who's going to just take care of it better because that's their one thing, it's always going to be worth the investment. And there's, again, look at percentages. 40% of transactions fall through. With Sam, you've done over 800 transactions, and you've had less than 10% fall through. And a lot of that's heavy expectations and communication throughout the process. And everybody knows what's happening and what's not happening and what everybody's deadlines are. And there's follow-up, which doesn't always happen when you're out there trying to do everything on your own.
And it wasn't until recently, honestly, that You know, I do the hard money brokering, obviously. I've been doing a lot of the back end stuff myself, and I have my wife who's doing these transactions. And honestly, I didn't even think to put the two and two together of using my wife as a transaction coordinator until recently. And the reason was, this is not a jab at you or anything, Sam, but I didn't think it was in your, like, what you were trying to do with your business, right? I thought you were just trying to work with realtors and work with contracts that make sense and not fuzzy timelines. But just having a transaction coordinator, because that back end stuff is probably my worst nightmare, to be honest with you.
Well, and the timelines don't have to be fuzzy. Like, obviously, I hear a lot about what you guys are doing. I hear your phone calls that you're doing, and I know I can help, but I also have to let you guys run your businesses, and that's more marriage than work.
But just the fact that you can do these creative finance deals and you can figure out how to do these off-market things, and you make everyone's job and life so much easier. So thank you for that.
So I guess we never actually got through a transaction. What are the steps for the rookies out there that just want to know, like, okay, what actually happens when you're in escrow? What does escrow mean? Can we go step by step? So when someone gets a deal under contract, what happens next?
Yeah, and I'm gonna go by a standard like real estate contract, because obviously by the time you get like a outside contract involved, it gets a little bit
Let's not do that. Let's just do a traditional deal. What does a traditional deal look like?
traditional deal. You get under contract, we open escrow on that same day, and that means a title and escrow company is going to be handling your funds. They're going to be looking into the property. Typically, somewhere between 3 to 5 business days, you're depositing your $1, $5, $20,000 earnest money, and like Nick described, that is just your good faith money that you are interested in purchasing this property.
Consideration.
Consideration, yes. And so once that earnest money is deposited, typically, I have seen it where earnest money and closing are actually due on the same day. Just just those really quick closes. So that's happened before. I don't recommend it. So earnest money gets turned in, your inspection timeline starts. Your inspection timeline can really be anything that you want it to be. I think your standard somewhere between 5 and 7 days.
But this is agreed upon before you have an accepted offer. Everything's agreed upon prior to bringing the contract to the title company.
Yes. So all of these dates are already in your contract. So somewhere between 5 and 7 days, generally, you have your primary home inspection. You do have options for secondary home inspections as well. In Idaho, those are two separate timelines. I'm not as familiar with Washington. I've only seen the one, but I think they have other contracts for secondary inspections as well that add on to your primary inspection. But you can, for the primary home inspection, you're looking at the general structure of the home. Secondary, you can get into your wells, your septic, radon. I've seen mold. I've seen be called out. So whatever other kind of particular concerns you might have for that particular property could also be specified in your secondary timeline. Once your inspections are completed, that timeline is when you have to provide something in writing to the seller saying, I'm good with how the house looks. I'm not happy with how it looks and I want you to remediate things, or I'm not happy with how it looks and I want you to change the price somehow, whether it's a seller credit or reducing the price. So this is like your negotiation period based on the condition of the property. You've looked into all aspects of the property, and based on those conditions, you can negotiate a little bit more. This is where the realtor typically gets back involved.
In a traditional transaction, what is the most common problem with the house that people ask for a seller to fix? And what is the most reasonable thing to fix that you see people agree on the most?
These are interesting questions because I can't say I think about it very often. I think the most reasonable thing that people do is some sort of price reduction, but I'm trying to think of what's like called out the most.
You know what I've seen the most is just getting your HVAC inspected.
Oh yeah, that's pretty common.
Yeah, so if you want to try to avoid that, before you list your house, if you're a seller, just call an HVAC company, just get get it tuned up and have them put a sticker or note the sticker when they were there last. Because if it's not there, an inspector's going to call that out and be like, this thing's probably broken. $12,000 to fix that because no one's been here forever. And, all you have to do is just change the filter and have a company come tune it up and clean it out.
Yeah, not a big deal, but there's definitely things as the seller that you can do, like getting everything kind of tuned up, and that will help on a standard home.
Yeah. And if you really want to be a really good seller and like be ultra prepared and just be a badass, get your home inspected before you put your house on the market and take care of everything on that inspection report. And then give that inspection report to your agent checked off like, hey, we did all these things. And when they market the property, they can put that up there. And a lot of buyers can look at that and potentially not even get an inspection when they go to purchase that house. That's a good hack out there for the sellers that want to just do things right from the beginning.
The inspection period is always, I feel like, the most intense time, because you've been under contract for about a week, like you've got the earnest money in, now you're meeting with the inspector, now you're reviewing the inspection report, and so it's a little bit more time intensive. Once you've negotiated all of your inspection items and everybody's happy and good to go, this is when the lending typically gets involved. I like my personal preference is this is when lending gets involved. Your appraisal gets ordered. For hard money lenders, every hard money lender kind of has different stipulations on what they need to see. Sometimes they need the video of the property, but that's typically done way sooner than this portion. They're not going to need an appraisal. They're not looking at the value of the property in the same way that a bank is, a standard bank. Now, this is when the appraisal is ordered, and I found that a lot of buyers don't necessarily understand what an appraisal is and how it functions. So typically the bank is its own entity, and they order from a third party appraising company that may or may not work directly for the bank or not. I don't know if you've seen that different, Nick.
Yeah, they don't work for the bank. Yeah, they have a pool of appraisals that like there's an appraisal committee usually with the bank, and it's they order an appraisal from a pool, and then people can like take the job, and then but that appraiser has no affiliation with the bank, and it's highly regulated now. That way, they're not biased at all when they give an appraisal report that should be accurate based off comps.
Yeah. So then that party, like you said, takes the job. They go out to the property. They schedule that with the listing agent and the seller. They take a look at the property and they comp it based on MLS listings, previous closings in the area, and they're pretty strict about it. And then they place an evaluation. It is important to note, though, that they typically go out there with the purchase price in mind. They have the contract. So it's really important that the bank has all of the contracts. If for some reason they go out and they don't have your inspection negotiations where you negotiated a higher or lower price for whatever reason, they may come back with a different number just because they were trying to justify what they already had in their hand, that contract they already had in their hand.
Yeah. What I see happen so much is you'll have an initial offer from somebody that has a low price. Let's say you're selling a house for $400,000, and then the initial offer is $350,000, and then you counter back and forth. Let's say you wind up at $385,000, and then you have the contract, and then you have these addendums of counter offers. Sometimes the counter offers don't get sent to the appraiser, and then the appraiser is going off 350, and then it appraises low, and then sometimes they just want to be sticklers back. Now it's 350. Go F yourselves. We're not going to redo. So you got to be careful. Make sure. You got to make sure, and that's why it's helpful to have a transaction coordinator to make sure that the full contract is being sent to everybody.
Yeah, because it gets messy when the appraiser gets out there and they justify that original purchase price, and now
I've done my work.
Yeah. Now your buyers are having to come with, however much money to make up the difference, or renegotiate, or the deal could fall apart because they don't want to renegotiate for whatever reason. So that's the appraisal process. So once that's been ironed out, a standard lender, this now goes into underwriting. I'm not a lender, so I can't speak to what that means. I think every lender is a little bit different in their processes and procedures. but it'll go into underwriting for final approval, and the lender will send docs over to escrow. This is when we're coordinating closing. And the difference between signing versus closing is something else that buyers don't understand is you have to go and sign the documents. Once escrow has all of the loan docs, they have everything from tax records from the HOA, all of the things that go into this particular property and your purchase. So you're signing the documents at escrow. Typically 3 days. I really like 2 or 3 days before the closing date, because that gives everybody an opportunity to review all the documents, have any questions answered, iron out any last minute details. If you're signing the day of closing, it puts everybody in a rush and things get missed. So that's my least favorite is 8 a.m. signing on the day of.
Yeah, because those papers still have to be reviewed by the lender again. That's sending the funds. Once everybody's signed around, then they have to go back over the paperwork and make sure it's all correct. And then they may have, oh, I missed something, or we forgot a document. So yes, definitely a good idea. Great advice. If you're trying to close on the 30th, try to sign on the 27th.
Because and the other part too is escrow doesn't necessarily do, so you have to get funds there from the lender, but then they have to send all of the documents to the county for recording. And that recording process where they actually record your deed and things along those lines to transfer it into your name, that takes time. And some escrow companies have, most cutoff times I think are somewhere between noon and 2, and it just depends on how busy everyone is. Fridays closings are always busiest. So I mean, if you're concerned about a quick close, I wouldn't have it be on a Friday. I wouldn't have it be at the end of the month. Those are always when escrow and the county are going to be their very, very busiest. A Tuesday or Wednesday closing.
So to recap the process, you get an offer. It goes to a title and escrow company. You're typically going through the inspection period at this time. And then there's a second part to that if there's any request made, a second timeline of making sure that you're responding in time. And then that's when, if there's a loan, the lender is going to get an appraiser out there. That can take another week or so to get done. Easily a week, minimum a week, could be 2. And then they're trying to coordinate the signing, and then it's funding and recording. And that's 30 days in a nutshell. But typically it's hard when you have all that going on. It's kind of hard to close in less than 3 weeks anyway, right?
Yeah, if you have a loan involved, it's really hard to close in 3 weeks. Get all the inspections done and taken care of, and then the lending process done. I know with private money or hard money, people like the idea of it closing way sooner because you don't have the appraisal process necessarily. Maybe you're buying the property as is, so you don't have that inspection timeline to worry about. So it can be quicker, but there are still due diligence things that title and escrow have to take care of.
Yeah, I like to think of everything, and then you correct me if I'm wrong, but everything in about a week and a half. So like the inspection period, typically a week and a half. The appraisal process could be a week and a half, maybe 2. And then the title and escrow process for them to get everything that they need to close could take a week and a half.
I feel like those are really safe, good timelines.
Yeah, if you cut off anything, you can take a week and a half off your timeline.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have any interest in hearing about like different, like weird kind, whether it's seller financing or subject to, or even like the loan takeover kind of transactions.
Sub 2?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any good stories?
Well, I think it's interesting to talk about some, not necessarily the subject to, but there was a while where sellers were assigning their loans, similar to subject to, but where it's an assignable loan.
Assumable.
Yes, that's the word. Thank you.
I was like, there's still a couple of them on the market.
There are still a couple of them on the market. Those ones were super interesting. I processed like 5 right off the bat when I first opened up, like February, March. And it's amazing how long those took. And my biggest takeaway from those is that so your standard loan has been sold to a third party holding company of some kind. Well, that third party isn't normally processing loans. They don't have the systems and procedures to process a loan. So like when they do those loan assumptions, a lot of the like lenders that you were working with, they work like 2 half days a week. And so your 30-day loan was taking 90 days at least. It just takes a lot longer. And so I think that's where some of the realtors didn't necessarily know what they were getting into, but they assumed that, and I would have probably done the same had I not had these experiences, that it would be similar to any kind of other standard loan procedure. But because they don't have the systems in place to process a loan, they take forever.
And these buyers, they have to qualify for an assumable loan, right?
Yeah, the qualification things were different too. Like each of them had different kind of qualification procedures. So trying to create systems for that as a TC that like
That's interesting. I haven't actually, I mean, you hear about assumable loans all the time, but I've never actually talked to anybody who's actually put one together.
yeah, and they were pains.
Good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
So at least 90 days.
Yeah, at least 90 days. And like, and don't quote me on it just because every single one was different, but these are not your standard lenders. That's not what they do. They don't process loans. So that's the hoop that you're going to be jumping through. That's going to be your pain point when, because it's a great idea, like taking over someone's 3.5% loan. Like that's brilliant. It's just not going to happen in 30 days. So emotionally, just being prepared for the time that it's going to take and not getting discouraged when it takes longer.
Cool. Jeremy, you got any more questions?
No, man. I think we're doing pretty good. We're about at the hour mark. Yeah. So, I do want to say before we get in the wrap up, though, obviously, Sam, it's great seeing you grow, and I'm super proud of you for starting your own business and learning to thrive the way you have. I'm speaking for Nick too as well, but I'm sure he says the same thing. Awesome having you by our side, and look forward to continued growth from you for sure. So, we do some predetermined questions. Oh, are you gonna cry, Sam? No, you don't do that. Okay.
Even when you're pregnant, you don't have emotions?
Uh,
No.
no, I am. I'm hormone
She's like,
soup.
yeah.
I am. I call myself hormone soup, and like happy feelings are what make me cry. So
Oh.
Blah. Quote of the day from Sam. Blah.
Bleh.
No, but we do some predetermined questions at the end, Sam, just kind of as a wind down. The first question for you is: if you had one business, investing, or I'm even going to throw in self-help book into this mix that you recommend every single entrepreneur or investor read, what would that be?
I'm currently reading this one. I'll recommend that one.
Breaking the habit of being yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yikes.
Breaking the habit of being your bad self, girl.
Oh, it's really, really cool. Yeah, I've been part of a small group coaching program that a lot of it is about manifesting everything that you want. And this is just like the solid science behind it. So far, my biggest takeaway is like the atoms that make up the physical things that we see are 99% energy. Like we don't see 99% of everything that's in front of us. Like our last coaching call, we were like, is this coffee mug real?
Y'all been watching The Matrix too much.
Yeah. Being able to like build your own realities and the science behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question for you, Sam, is if you had $30 million gifted to one of your bank accounts, what's the first thing you would spend it on?
The paperwork to lay myself off my current job.
There you go.
I don't know.
That's different than what I thought. I thought you were gonna say vacation because that's that's your love language, vacations, I think. So
Yeah, I want to be laid off.
And you just became a business owner? Do you know how this works?
Yeah, I did this backwards. What's the first thing I would spend my money on?
Yeah. Like if you had the money, the indispensable money where it didn't matter, money didn't matter, what would you buy first? Whether an investment, a vacation, a new car.
I do really like the idea of a large Airbnb house somewhere. I'd want to do the research to like make sure it makes sense. But like I have this vision of my whole family getting together for the holidays. And so a house that's large enough for my family to get together for the holidays. Everybody has a room and a space. Like we've stayed at these kinds of houses for Christmas and things like that, that I loved it. And what if I just owned it and this is where we all gathered every year? We knew we were coming here every year, but then I was able to Airbnb it or rent it out for the remainder of the year. So
There you go.
That's a good vision.
A house that you use once a year to have your family together. I love it. Next question for you, Sam. What advice would you give to newer investors, maybe looking to get started on their first or second deal?
do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Oh.
Their first investment. I really like that, every problem has a solution. So building up your mentality that things will go wrong and there is a solution for it.
There's a fix. We can fix this.
You can chat GBT anything, any problem you have.
Correct. Next question for you, Sam. How do you define success?
I like it as some sort of general happiness, having the mental and emotional resilience to know that there's solutions to every problem.
I love it. And then, when you're not investing and you're not doing transaction coordinating, what do you like to do with your free time?
Solve everybody's problems.
Like to take time away from work and then go solve more problems. Love it.
Yeah.
And then last question for you, obviously, where can people find out more about you if they're interested in your services or interested in, following with you online? Where can they do that?
So if you are interested in transaction coordination, I think the website's elitetransactions.co. It is not .com. .com was like $4,000. So
we're working on budget systems here, ladies and gentlemen.
.co is easier to spell.
.co it saves you one letter every time.
You can't be typing all day.
Yeah. Otherwise, you guys can follow me on Facebook, and I like getting together and chatting about anything and everything. So happy to meet up for coffee to talk transactions or investing or anything along those lines. I like sharing the fact that I do have a lot of experience in different kinds of real estate deals. So if there's a particular deal that you're wanting to put together, I'd love to review it or look at the contract even. I really love paperwork. I don't care for people. So
we're so opposite there. I hate paperwork.
So if you need reviews on it, happy to help. I've got a lot of different business experience too. So if you guys have different ideas for what you're doing in your business, I do really like that stuff. That's something I've really learned to enjoy, is hearing people's different ideas and like giving ideas about ways to implement it and grow it. I do think that's super cool.
Very cool. Well, right on. Well, hey, Sam, thanks so much again for joining us today. Nick, why don't you go ahead and take us out of here?
All right. To my favorite cousin-in-law's spouse. See you next time. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hopefully you learned a few things, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.
Bye! Thank you so much for checking out the Investor Shed podcast. If you enjoyed your time, make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow along on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at The Investor Shed for shorts and promos about each episode. Do you want to be a guest or know someone who has great real estate investing advice and stories? Reach out to us at theinvestorshed@gmail.com.